Hello, good morning, everyone. Great to see a lot of people here for this wonderful panel. So excited to bring our panelists up and have a really great discussion today. I'm really thrilled to be back and invited back from day one. I was here last year for a panel discussion, and I learned so much from our panelists last year, just a range of industries they come from, a range of responsibilities they have in their organizations. So when From Day One approached me about coming back again this year, I'm jumping at the chance because I learn something every day in my job. But that's not an exaggeration. Something new every single day. We all experienced something new yesterday with the eclipse, and what a cool thing that was for everybody here. Hope you got outside to see it. And so I'm excited to learn a lot from these panelists today talking about manager effectiveness. First thing we're going to do is just a quick introduction for everybody. Your name, who you work for, what you do there, and we're going to start with you, Gretchen.
My name is Gretchen Jacoby. I work for General Assembly. I am the head of enterprise for GA.
Steve?
My name is Steve Holder. I am the head of our solution advisory team called Visier. If you want to try to impress friends at family events, you can tell them that solution advisory is the geeks who can speak, who make our technology consumable for people. And we're a technology company that specializes in HR data and people data. And we sell a people analytics solution that helps you get insight into your employees.
Hello, my name is Nicole Poole-McGill. I am the SVP Talent and Development at Digitas North America. I'm also owner and Chief Coaching Officer of Coach Me Coach, coaching practice that I own.
You have a fan.
Cheering section, that's great. Kristy?
Kristy Callahan. I have the pleasure of leading the Learning and Leadership Development team at GE Healthcare.
And Jason Williams, I'm the SVP of Talent Management Capabilities and Culture for Expedia.
First question I have for you guys, I want to talk about first-time managers. That's a hard job no matter what company you're in, how old you are, it doesn't matter. Typically, these people are really great at one thing that's so important for their company. They probably have other skills as well. But then what are some of the biggest lessons that you've been able to impart on your colleagues for these first-time managers in helping them overcome the obstacles outside of the one thing that they're already awesome at? Kristy?
Sure, great question. So it's always interesting when you come into the new role and you think, oh, what I did is what got me here, but that old book about what got you there won't keep you here is really true, especially for frontline managers, because it is so myopic in role initially, and then when you start leading people, that changes, and there's a big variety within that. So what they need to start doing is thinking not so much about what it is that makes them successful, but each member of the team in addition, and then also the business. So it's like that threefold need.
Nicole, anything you want to add?
Yeah, when managers, oftentimes I don't feel like they're prepared, because they are hired for their technical skill, and then they get 3 or 4 people with them, and they're like, okay, what do I do with them?
The people, yeah.
And the people. And I've been in positions where we had the opportunity to prep managers, or we saw that potential and their interest, and then put them in positions to manage people before they became managers. If that prep was there, it would be so, I think, helpful for them to come in just having some of that skill and learning it and getting the training so they could apply as soon as they become managers.
And I bet some of the feedback you get is, I didn't maybe know I was good at this, or I didn't know I had these skills, but
absolutely.
Because you got to prep them.
Or they get really interested in it, yeah.
Gretchen, anything in your organization you could think about related to this, helping first-time managers?
Yeah, I agree with Kristy around what got you there might not get you to the next place. And I think so often you've, as in getting promoted to be a manager, you've had the right answer. And now it's about how do you guide your team to find the right answer as opposed to giving them the right answer. So I think we need to focus really on helping managers define the outcome that they want from the team as opposed to telling their team how to achieve the outcome.
That leads me to my perfect next question, because Steve, I'm going to go to you here. Defining the outcome, measuring the things that matter for first-time managers or experienced managers. What's some of the attributes and performance metrics that are really crucial to find the best ones there?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm maybe a little biased because we're a people analytics company and we measure a lot of things. But I think when you think about a manager, it's going to come down to your corporate mandate, your corporate culture, the things that matter to your company, because different management skills, different attributes, different measurements are going to really be driven by what your organization thinks is important. So one of the things that we always see in every so we build manager effectiveness scorecards and dashboards that allow people to not only measure their peers, but also understand what they're doing. And the big one that always comes up is retention. That's a really easy one to throw on your manager effectiveness card, if you will. I think ones that are probably overlooked are things like diversity. We know that diverse teams have better outcomes, have better productivity, have better collaboration. So we like to see diversity as a key measure on there as well. Employee experience is also one of the metrics that a lot of HR professionals love and they use extensively. And I think employee experience, like it isn't a holistic measure a lot of the time. It's usually a point in time. If you're doing it quarterly, you're probably doing it a lot. And so I think you've got to round out your measure around experience. Experience is one data point and you need to look at the whole piece. And then the last piece, Alex, I'd say is starting to bring measurements that are the business metric. You know, Jason was mentioning it backstage that understanding what your developers are doing and their productivity, and are your senior developers doing more tickets or stories than your juniors? So starting to bring that business context in really helps the manager understand not only the people, but the effectiveness and the impact the people are having on the business, as well as the impact the business is having on the people, which is kind of our tagline.
Yeah, Jason, you want to talk about that bridge of the performance indicators that really matter to your organization?
Yes, and I would also say I do think that there is a slow roll in terms of managers getting access to data and figuring out how to use it. Because they're still, especially new managers, are still trying to unlock and understand how to stop being an individual contributor before they can understand how to lead people and also to take in data in order to make it show more impact from their leadership. I would also add that it's important, especially if you start leading bigger teams, to really understand how performance and productivity go hand in hand. And we in HR have suffered a lot from typically going straight towards engagement as this is the end all be all. But being able to identify on the business side, what are things that are enablers or barriers to productivity? So one of the things that more recently has happened in our company is we've taken a look at how much time are we spending in meetings as an organization. And so code of silence here. But we've been able to identify that we spend a large amount of time in meetings overall as a company above benchmark for an organization our size. We have a large amount of people who spend 2 or more hours in meetings, again, above benchmark. And then similarly, we have found that people are collaborating and engaging with like way too many people. And so as a manager, being able to look and dissect and say, how much time does my team spend in head down getting work done time versus how much time are they spending in meetings? You probably also need to look at yourself, right? Because you are probably role modeling some of that behavior, but being able to make a concrete change in how and where your team is spending its time using some type of business and organizational data like that can lead to much more stronger, not only manager effectiveness, but organizational effectiveness as well.
And that's so key, I think, especially we've all been in meetings where we thought, that was a great meeting. And we've all been in meetings where we said, that was a bad meeting. We didn't get anything done. And measuring that and trying to find attributes to pull out of, okay, well, which ones do we really need? Which recurring ones do we need? I know that can be so crucial. So I want to go next to kind of the structure of how do we build beyond those smaller indicators and attributes? What is the structure that organizations can build to make better managers and bringing in other approaches? So just building that and that pipeline. Where have you found success? Nicole, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Usually with specialized programs focused on managers or individual contributors moving into manager roles. And before I talked about the prep prior to, but when they're actual managers in that space, the more specialized program around do they know how to give feedback? Let's make sure they have the training. What about their communication style? What about situational leadership? Who did they could potentially be mimicking before? Did they have a good manager that was their role model, or did they have a not so great manager and they're pulling some of those characteristics in? A huge component of it as well is coaching. one-on-one coaching. Where do you feel like you are now in terms of your new role? Where do you want to be in the next 6 months? Let's talk about how you can get there. What relationships do you want to build with the team that you have and continue that connection? And then how do you juggle your individual responsibilities as well as managing the performance of multiple people? So those specialized programs can help in the sense that creating it. And I've done a couple, one that was 6 months long, one was a year long, just to make sure those individuals had success as managers in the organization.
And Kristy, I want to ask you the same thing. How important are those one-on-one meetings with those managers, making sure their development is where it needs to be? And then how do you make sure that kind of development goes organization-wide and making sure it's evenly spread throughout the company?
Yeah, so I think it is important that we remember all the meetings that we're having, all the work that we have to do. Post-hybrid, we're like robots. So how do we rehumanize working together? And that's a key piece of it, which I love that you brought up the one-on-one coaching. And to go deeper in that, I do have my executive coaching as well. It's such a passion, and you see how it really works. So if you tap into the strengths of each individual, how it's stronger than each separate member of the team. So what is that? How do you string that together to make that collective pool stronger? I mean, we just saw that with the women's basketball tournament. You had the GOAT versus the team of all-stars. So the team, they weren't all-stars, but together they were bringing out the best in each other. No one person played too much time on the court. So I just think that that's a prime example when you feel like there's one person on the team that is so strong. How do you bring others up? What is it that we all bring? We all have our superpowers, and how do we tap into that?
And they all have different skills, so you got to bring out that skill. Gretchen, what do you think about Talent Supply? Talent Supply, the General Assembly, how do you make that structure so that everybody gets the best brought out from them?
Yeah, well, I think something that's really interesting is that the idea of role modeling, and I think it's something like only 31% of managers have actually experienced formal development, upskilling, or reskilling. Yeah. And so then the people below them who are now reporting to them, who need to make time for synchronous or asynchronous training opportunities that are really going to make them more productive and help them, meet the business goals. They see that their manager isn't being given time for that. And so there's conflicting messages, right, about how they should make time for that and how they should prioritize that. So I do think that it's really important for managers to be clear that they themselves are on a learning journey and making time for that learning, because they are role models for the people below them who also need to do the same.
So when you think about managers, good managers, maybe managers that need some help, we all know people in our organizations or have worked with people previously who have some skills, but if you go to a lot of managers, you hear the line, I'd love to do that, but I just don't have the time. So how do we kind of work around that and help people, these managers who don't have time for all the things that they may want to do, how do we get them to learn new things? How do we help them excel and support them? And hopefully then it trickles down to the people below. Kristy, do you want to start us off on any nudges or micro learning, just in that limited window that they have to get them to just be better people?
Yeah, so it's all about learning in the flow of work. So how can you continue to have a growth mindset? When are those pieces of time that you have where you can easily, readily access what has ideally been curated specifically for you? So we're doing a lot of work. I was at Baxter Healthcare before. A lot of content that was specific and individualized to them based on their competencies and their areas of opportunity. And we were able to show that when we did a focused effort versus just a blanket of come to the well and drink, you'll learn, it'll be amazing. Once we actually did that and they felt like it was with intention, we saw a 48% increase in the competencies with the nudges, micro learning. There's a bunch of tech tools. We use LeadX, so there's a lot of different ones out there.
Yeah, Steve, or no, Jason, sure. What's kind of a nudge?
3 things that we've done at Expedia to help build on to the learning journey is, one, we have a people experience team, and they mapped out the manager journey and identified about 7 moments that matter that are specific kind of tension points where managers need resources. And so that was then used to build more of a performance support tool. That's old language, but we have a site for managers called the People Leader Hub. And they can go on there and they have access to those tools, which tend to be the top questions, the moments that matter. And so they have that resource that they can go to. And then the last thing that we did, which has been a bit of a test and learn, but we're starting to expand it right now, is that we are providing actual manager support in the business at those lower levels where typically an HR business partner does not have reach. It's called People Leader Partners. And so we have a team that's focused on people leader excellence, which kind of works with my team and sits in the HR business partner team. But that allows those managers who typically had to go to a system and ask a question or to submit a ticket to now actually have a real life person that they can talk to. And those people leader partners will point them to resources on the People Leader Hub, will help them through some of those moments that matter, and also can recommend some of the training that we have for them.
That's excellent, helping them get a little better. Steve, same kind of question to you. I mean, when you take the data from the organizations that you work with, how do you then create or help the organization create kind of a structure to say, all right, these people who are so pressed for time, how do we make them be better and bring them along even higher?
Yeah, and I think if you just flog them more, that should work, right? Like just tell them to do better.
Do better.
No, it's a challenge, right? Because managers are busy. They're trying to balance the needs of the business with the needs of the people, and it's challenging. I was going to make a comment on the new manager thing. I think also a lot of managers fall into that trap of thinking they're like you or thinking they're like the best in class. And you've got diverse teams. You've got to kind of play to people's strengths. So to that point, how do you build this culture of growing and learning, to Kristy's point, right? I think there's a couple things that I think are important. First of all is visibility and alignment. Giving people visibility into what effectiveness looks like. Having programs like Jason, you highlighted, that give them the moments that matter is critical. And I think alignment is the other piece, which is saying at the top down, is this a priority? Are we going to make it more effective, or are we just going to try to squeeze more juice out of that fruit or that lemon, right? Not that managers are lemons, but so I think there's a piece around alignment, there's a piece around visibility, and a lot of our customers who are really killing it have made conscious and kind of informed decisions on pushing content out to leaders and giving them benchmarks, letting them see how they're doing relative to their peers. Nothing stokes the fire than a little bit of, hey, you're 2 points below the benchmark, right? I think people will respond to that, and they'll look for tools and ways and allow the organization to support them if they're looking at their performance. So I think best in class says get alignment, make it a priority, create that visibility, and then actually arm your leaders with information. And I know, again, I'm kind of biased here, but I think actually giving them the insights that they need to make decisions and not locking it behind the HR wall. I think because people data is so sensitive and we want to be very mindful of the responsibility that our employees have with our organization. We've got to be mindful of that, but we don't have to be restrictive in terms of actually enabling leaders to see what's going on and having the conversation. So.
Just the visibility, I think, would be a big step. Here's where you got to go. Here's where others are, and here's how we can get you there. So I think one of you brought up, this post-COVID still kind of hybrid world that many of us are all in, trying to find the right balance of well-being, productivity, but both when you're in the office, both when you're at home, and just juggling it all, which is a huge challenge. It was a challenge for managers anyway when we were all in the office, and now that added layer since then. So what are some of the challenges that you all are seeing in your organizations related to productivity, team building in these two settings? And then how is your group, your organization supporting managers to help them deal with making everything seem like it's going okay or as good as it can be, even though you're dealing with these two very different situations? So Nicole, do you want to start us off on supporting them in both settings?
Sure. In this new world we're in, I call it a new world because it's just not what it used to be. The connection is gone. It's all about connection. And usually when we're in the office, we get by the water cooler. I know that's dating myself. Or the kitchen, the cookies, the muffins, the bagels. And we can talk to one another and connect and talk about our weekends and those type of things, where we now feel like the computer stops us from doing all of that. Yes, we can't be in person, and I don't know if I'm on an island by myself, but I think it's possible through the computer to connect. But you have to be very intentional around that, and even strategic, if you will, in building those relationships, because now everyone is everywhere. You know, some people are fully remote. Some people are going into the office 3 days a week. Some people are showing up at work and they're the only person from their team at that location. So it's so important to be intentional around meeting people, and I know a lot of meetings, but still meeting people and making that meeting and talking to them about things that are outside of work, especially your team, but people outside your team as well. And then connecting on a different level, not just the work stuff, but what really is important to individuals. And I know I talked about coaching before, and managers having that individual attention. And I know we talked about telling people and not keeping it behind this curtain. Also, it's about sharing expectations. A lot of times people go into roles and be like, okay, I need to be successful. Let me go be successful. And they don't talk about how to be successful, or no one is telling them how to be successful. So having those expectations up front so they know the roadmap to follow when it goes there, whether they're hybrid, or fully remote.
You talked about talking to some of your employees and your coworkers about non-work things, and like those check-ins that were easy and spontaneous in an in-person setting. And anybody can jump in here. Does it require, you think, not a mandate, but just a nudge to your managers of, hey, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not focused on something work-related, is important, is valuable? I don't know if anybody wants to jump in and talk about how maybe that can be encouraged in some ways.
I have 2 comments on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm maybe one of the weird ones that has always been remote. Pre-COVID, it was just part of my world. And I think being intentional to making that time. And like my one-on-ones, I have them every week. I have a bunch of direct reports. It takes, before I wake up on Monday morning, I've got about 20 hours of meetings, right? And so it's like, how do you start to be intentional, to your point, about talking to the person and understanding them and what have they been up to? And it takes no time at all. And I think we've got a great tool with one-on-ones that's often overlooked. And I find leaders who jump in and start going at the business and managing the business and not the person, those are interesting one-on-ones, right? It's almost too much. The other comment I would make is that in a hybrid world, I remember when I used to have to walk upstairs to go to a meeting room or have time in between meetings. And so I think we've got to also be kind to ourselves and coach our leaders to say, give yourself time to decompress. Create that 15-minute gap in between your meetings so you can kind of prepare for the next conversation. So 2 hybrid tips as somebody who's been doing it for most of his career.
And as somebody who's been fully in person since the pandemic started, we weren't working at home. You can't do the studio really at home. And anybody who live broadcast at home, it didn't look as good. But I'm thinking about how when more people would come back into the office, everybody who could do their jobs at home, I would see more people come back in. Hey, good to see you. We'd catch up for a little bit. But then eventually when it became more normal that they'd be in on a regular basis, I would make sure that, if I saw this person 2-3 days in a row or 2-3 times in a row, that I wasn't going to them for something that I need for all of those times. At least one of those times I just kind of said, hey, can we chat? How you doing? Catching up with things. Because then nobody wants to be the person that's constantly demanding something all the time, every time you see that person. So being intentional about it. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
One thing I would add, maybe just personal experience. So I was the one who was made a jab at. No one from my team is in Chicago. So when I'm in the office, I'm on Zoom. When I'm at home, I'm on Zoom.
It's awesome.
It is awesome. But and my team is spread out around the world. But what I have found is that I have had to become intentional in actually doing things that are different in order to build relationship with my team. For my direct reports, we laugh, we have fun, we figure things out. But for my extended team, it's hard to have that same type of relationship. So my EA, who is way smarter than me, came up with this whole thing called Cups and Conversations with Jason. And so once a month, she just blocks out my whole day and asks people on the team to sign up. And it's just a casual conversation about whatever you want. Some people want to talk about work. Some people want to talk about, you shared this post with your family, or they just want to have a casual conversation. But that's allowed me, at least, to break down the barrier, because I would always say, hey, put time on my calendar. Nobody puts time on your calendar unless it's work related. And so sometimes we just have to do things that are different in order to break that barrier. And then I'll give you one more example. And this has been an example I've used with my manager, because we are supposed to come into the office 10 days a month, which that doesn't happen.
Love the honesty.
Just be honest. But one of the things I was saying to my manager as we're trying to figure out how to make in-person more engaging, I said, if I go into the office, I have to actually completely do a different thing in order to make it more engaging. Because otherwise I'm just going to go and sit in conference rooms all day. I said, well, maybe I just need to come in one day and say, you know what, this whole day, I'm just HR for the company. Anybody have a question, I'm just going to be in this booth and come talk to me. Like, completely change your routine. And that's something that managers also need to think about. When do you need to completely change your routine in order to really engage and build a more dynamic and personal relationship with people on your teams?
I want to next move to the growing field of people analytics and all the data that's coming into a business that for so long has been entirely human, entirely mostly subjective, and how the blend is going, how your organizations are incorporating more data and more inputs, really to help, again, the managers grow in their roles. Gretchen, do you want to start us off and talk about how you're using those tools?
Yeah, sure. So obviously there's so much data on how people are spending their time, on how satisfied they are with their work. I think that data is, we often think of it as in charts and graphs. I want people to also encourage them to think about data as what they experience in their one-on-ones, right? I think that's so important to think about qualitative data and the data that you're collecting just by being in a room, even if it's a Zoom room with your colleagues. I think one of the most important criteria for a good manager is emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is really the ability to read a room. And that's data, the ability to read a room. And so while I know there's a lot to be said about going up by 1 percentage point and did you have an ROI on this, and I believe in all of that, I also think that managers really need to be aware that they're getting data in every single interaction that they have with a team member or a cross collaborator.
Steve, I know you could probably host a whole talk on this in terms of the people analytics, but how are you seeing it being implemented across different organizations, and how effective it's been in helping managers?
Yeah, I was talking earlier today to some people coming by our little table there, and HR has been less data savvy, not to be so bold, but I think HR is at a tipping point now where getting that insight is critical. And to your point, people analytics is not about a dashboard. It's not about charts and graphs. That is not the thing. And leaders don't need more visuals to tell them where they're at. I think for me, when you talk about data, when you talk about analytics, when you talk about effectiveness, it's about, okay, now what do I do about it? So how do you take that number and make an action about it? And so for managers, like, you've got new managers, you've got senior managers, you've got people who are stuck in their ways, you've got people who are innovative, you've got a whole spectrum. And we've got to basically meet people where they're at and create an environment where they can be as data savvy as they need to be, or that you can help move them up the data literacy curve. That's a big thing that we talk about. I don't want to do a whole talk on this, but I think to your point, Alex, I think it's about meeting them where they're at and helping them actually bridge the insight to an action they can do. And there's a lot of techniques, there's programs you can put in place, it's connecting to learning, there's a whole bunch of techniques you can do. And then the last thing I'll say is, I think one of the points that Gretchen made is about, it's not just about the empirical, hard, quantitative measures, right? We have to have qualitative views of this, and things like skills. Skills is a big topic, right? How do you help managers build skills plans so they can upskill their people and deliver the needs of the business? So there's just a lot of nuance there, but I think the point is that you have to meet them where they're at and help them grow into that conversation.
Next, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Kristy.
I think the data helps you tell the story of what you likely instinctually know. So then it's like black and white, because you have this data.
I'll share just one.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we do technical training on technical skills, and we can deliver assessments that say, at the beginning you were a 3 out of 10, at the end you were a 9 out of 10. What not just we've found, but what the research is now saying about those pre and post assessments on skills is that they're actually less accurate than just asking somebody, do you feel that you know this skill better? Just a self-assessment is because you can actually sort of cheat the test, right? So looking at the data around believing people, right? Just like believing people to say that they have improved in an area, that is real data. And I think people discount that sometimes, but I think it's actually now what, large research studies are saying is more valid.
Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I just actually want to make a plug. Let's make sure that all the people in HR actually know how to take data and turn it into insight so that they can be the coaches and role models. Because if we just give that to managers and you as an HR individual, as an HR team, don't have that proficiency, it's going to be hard for that to be adopted and utilized by managers in the field.
Yeah, all about what comes next then.
Yeah.
Next, I want to move, the cause of diversity, equity, and inclusion has faced headwinds lately. But most employers are still as committed as ever to valuing inclusion in the workplace. So how can managers be measured for that factor and just taught to be better at that as we're taking a closer look at bringing that aspect into their role? Nicole, do you want to start us off?
First, I would say to partner with your DEI partners as part of the HR function or even outside of that. But it's interesting. Inclusion brings about intention as well. You have to be intentional because raise your hand if you've ever seen or been a part of a clique at an organization. Just people that, oh, no one's raising their hand. Okay.
Yeah.
Really? Really? But no, and my point there is when people feel excluded or isolated, they have a poor experience at the organization. Either that is making them leave or their manager is making them leave, right? So when you think about inclusion, having individuals really hone in on the principles of what that means. And then if it's a team, start to identify what that means for your individual team. Now, how do I want to be inclusive here? Training is essential to it all, to learn those principles, but then to actually embrace them and make sure that this person who probably feels like they don't have a voice or feel isolated or the only remote person on a 10-person team, how are you bringing that person in? Do they know about what's going on? And are there things in place where they can be a part of it and feel like they're part of the team? So inclusion is so very important when it comes down to people's experiences at their workplace.
And I would think a lot of those experiences, if it's not going well, happen in silence, right? They may not be willing to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit left out.
But as a manager,
yeah.
I'll know that one person on that remote team is just like, what can I do for this individual when I have the other 9 folks in? So it's about managers paying attention to what's happening, even in meetings, the quiet folks versus the people that are always speaking, giving them the space or talking to them individually, like, how do you want to show up in this space when we do meetings, and having those conversations.
Anybody else want to jump in on this? I have another big topic next. I know we can't leave without talking about the big one. I think you know where this is going. I want to talk about AI. I know it's a hot one. It's evolving all the time. There's no one right answer. Somebody said backstage, excellent point. Anybody who thinks they're the expert and they've got it all figured out and they know exactly where it's going is lying. But specifically related for managers and how we can start incorporating some AI to help managers be better at their jobs. How do you see AI impacting the managerial level, if you can speak on that? And in the long term, how do you see it being a benefit or a detriment? Any thoughts on AI? Gretchen, do you want to start us off a little bit on this?
Sure. So, I'm sure you've all seen the studies that in the next 5 years, roughly 30% of the tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis are going to be automated away. And sometimes that feels scary, but we've seen this actually before with, email, with personal computers, that it doesn't actually eliminate jobs. It just frees up time for people to do higher value work. And I think that that's going to be especially true of the manager role. I think about sales managers, for example. Sales managers probably spend 15% of their week just doing forecasting, saying what bookings, what sales do I think are going to come in this month or this quarter. That is going to be able to be done a lot better by a machine in the future. And so that's freeing up time for them to coach their team, to work on the business, to work on cross collaboration on projects that will help lift up their team. And so I think that it's going to be a huge opportunity, and that managers to start thinking about what of their role they can reinvest, how they could reinvest their time if things came off their plate. Like, start now. What would be the top 3 things you would invest your time in if 4 hours of your week in terms of work that you're doing now went away? And really, not just the manager themselves, but their team around them, start thinking about what those higher value, higher order activities are, because that's what they're going to be moving towards over the next 5 years, not in, a single moment, but like they need to be able to evolve and take small steps there on the way.
I also think, maybe with this, some of the things that are being early adopted in your organizations will focus on the freeing up of time for things, especially in this field, that don't relate with people, so that we can take care of that stuff, so we can deal more with the people who are the most important part of all this. Kristy, nodding your head, I think you're picking up on maybe just freeing up that time.
Yeah, I was going to say to Gretchen, I was like, I hope they said coaching their team as one of the top 3 in response to that, because it is so important. And the competencies of each role are evolving and changing as we think about what that can look like as well. So agility, critical thinking, I'm super excited about AI. I know a lot of people have some fear, and I'm probably a little too optimistic about it. So I'm glad people do ground me in the reality with it. But I said to my early careers that roll up into me, I was like, this to you all is like the World Wide Web was to us.
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say the other thing, I saw a demo about a week and a half ago of a tool that would allow, it would write the manager's performance review for the employee. It would pull in goals, it would pull in any feedback, and then there was some way that you could change the sentiment or the focus of it. And I call that out to say, there's still some elements around responsible use that we need to make sure that our managers and actually all of our employees are aware of, because we as HR have chided managers for not providing feedback or for not providing performance review. But now if they can go to, Gemini or Copilot and it just generates it, are they really spending the amount of time? How accurate is it? So we just need to make sure that they don't just cut and paste and put it in the system. So there is that element, I think, of responsible use that we need to figure out what are the guardrails that we want our managers to operate with.
And one of the biggest words that keeps coming back in all applications of AI is that authentic. Right. Is that really authentic to what that experience should be?
I have one comment. I've been working in the AI space for 10 plus years. And I think everybody's so fixated on artificial intelligence and what its role is and the robotness of it all. I like to think of IA, which is intelligent automation for business, right? So when you think about how do you intelligently automate those tasks that are lower value to get a better outcome and doing it ethically, that's really what I think the opportunity for AI is. And Gen AI is just the latest in a whole spectrum of AI techniques and models that you can use to get value from automation and doing things that require lower value tasks, let the computer do that. So I think there's a lot to be said. Again, I could probably do a whole talk on this, so I'm not going to do that today. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and HR should be looking at it as opposed to letting your IT colleagues drive the conversation.
On that optimistic note, let's thank our panelists for this wonderful discussion. Thank you all. Thanks.